Hey folks, welcome to Scholar About Tarot. Just call me Mayfield, and thanks a ton for stopping by the study space. Today we're going to talk about a couple of zombie-themed decks that I own and have in my collection and actively work with, because, oh my god, this topic has been on my mind for an incredibly long time. I've actually had quite a few drafts of the script for this because I don't even know what to say. I think I've easily had an almost completed script for discussing zombie-themed tarot decks for easily before the channel was even thought of. But I kind of had a little bit of a breakthrough within the last couple weeks because I learned about a little something called the zombie bridge riddle, and it's a riddle that I learned from a little bit of a workshop that I attended for my day job, and it comes from a TED Ed video by Alex Gendler, and I hope I pronounced their name correctly. But let's go ahead and start off with that riddle, and then we'll talk about it in context with the way that we work with zombie decks. So let's say you scored an amazing internship. It's located in a secluded lab all the way at the top of a mountain, and it's mildly safe. That mildly is doing a lot of work because the lab has a horde of zombies stored in the basement. And you let them out because you just had to pull that lever marked with a skull on it. So now you, the other lab assistant, the janitor, and the professor have to escape. Upon exiting the building, you find yourself confronted by a long, rickety bridge. Everyone needs to cross safely and cut the bridge before the horde gets to you, but there are a couple of ground rules that we have to abide by. All of your party members travel at different speeds. You can make it across in 1 minute. The assistant can do it in 2. The janitor who's a little slower, takes 5 minutes to cross, and our professor takes 10 minutes. The bridge can only hold 2 people at a time, otherwise it will buckle and collapse under the weight. You also got a lantern, but it super sucks and can only illuminate a small portion of the bridge at a time. Anyone crossing the bridge either needs to be in front holding the lantern or walking right behind the person who's carrying it. No one can cross the bridge without the aid of the lantern. Now, everyone has to be off the bridge before the zombies to get to it, because 2 crossers plus 1 zombie equals 3 people on the bridge, which we already know means death. And finally, the professor was able to calculate that the zombies will catch up to you in just over 17 minutes. So you have 17 minutes to cross. So what is the most efficient way for everybody to cross safely? So we're not exactly going to explore the answer, though of course you are welcome to try in the comments, but we are going to explore what this question about zombies teaches us, especially within the method of solving it. So taken at face value, of course this is a math question, right? But when we really start thinking about how to get everyone across the bridge, we're being asked to have every person at every differing abilities to help each other through. We are also remembering the value that each person carries with them too. When I was in a discussion with other people trying to solve this, some of us thought, hey, why can't we sacrifice the professor since he takes so long? But that would be, inhumane and honestly unthinkable, because he was the one who figured out how long it's going to take us how long we need in order to survive, basically. So he was the one who figured out how long it would take the zombies to get to us. So he pulled his weight, and now it's our turn to pull our weight to help him get through as well. Many people, and I'll go ahead and tell you that this isn't going to work, but many people thought that since you, the hypothetical you, could get through the bridge in 1 minute, that it would be imperative to essentially have you carry everyone through. So go back and forth. And that doesn't work either, to put that kind of burden on a single person. And so that got me thinking that there's something about the inclusion of zombies that really highlights the humanity that's going on around in essentially escaping them, which I find to be super duper fascinating. So in the context of tarot, what does it mean to read from a zombie-themed tarot deck? I mean, yeah, it's fun, of course, but I mean, in both of these decks, we want to consider how is the reader perceived? Are we a newbie, a spectator? I mean, clearly we're the querent, right? What are these decks, however, trying to show and teach us? So I'm going to revisit an old book, Monsters in the Classroom, which I used in my Tarot Restless review, book report, excuse me. And we're going to take a look at how the Zombie Tarot and Tarot Z explore these different types of themes of maybe humanity, but also a little bit of history, maybe a little bit of space, and even a tad bit of politics. It's really got everything in it, but we're only going to cover them briefly because there's just way too much that this would end up being like an hour-long video, and I'm not about that life. Right off the bat, both decks function as a survival guide, although the depth does kind of vary a little. So for the Zombie Tarot, it's pretty point blank, if you catch my drift. The box is in ammo crates, and the meta-narrative is that the deck is marketed as like prediction and protection, if you could see that right there. We have some other details on the box: insight and ammunition for surviving the undead uprising. And I do think that it's really interesting that it says uprising. We got high caliber divination right here. And I just think that it's so interesting that the querent plays the role of a consumer in search of a zombie slayer, as though this is something one chooses to be as opposed to something one must become to survive. And there are even fictional coupons in the back, as though the economy still sort of thrives amidst the crumbling society. Tarot Z, on the other hand, is meant to be enjoyed as an informational guide than an instruction manual. If you have the limited edition version, the packaging depicts a locked and chained bunker that says, "Don't open tarot inside." And on the back, it says, "Welcome to the apocalypse." You can open the double doors, and the reader is met with vicious-looking zombies. Open the flap, and you get a survivor number. In typical Lo Scarabeo fashion, there's like multiple languages in the guidebook, so at first glance you might not think that there's really much in the instructions, but interestingly enough, many of the card descriptions are written as short narratives. In the introduction, the in-universe explanation of what we're doing with the guidebook is that it's a collection of stories that the rookie, or us, have to learn and study first if we want to survive. The querent is essentially a newcomer to the bunker of fellow survivors. We're there to listen to the rumors and stories that aid us through the landscape. One thing that actually like low-key kind of bothers me, because I'm just a total, I guess, history snob, is that a lot of people like to refer to this as, oh, this deck is like such a 50s themed deck. It's so 50s. That's only partially correct. So the Zombie Tarot, it's a Cold War deck, and it uses certain Cold War iconography in order to like show us how to maintain agency and power in situations that we have little control over, typically through depictions of nuclear fallout, jingoism, and commercial consumption. Record. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with a theme that made me realize that this was a Cold War deck, and that's the theme of nuclear fallout and jingoism. So first and foremost, just in case you didn't know, jingoism is basically a word that means extreme patriotism, often in a more like aggressive manner, and you might have seen something like this in your adult life, especially if you're American. You know exactly what that looks like. And in the context of the zombie tarot, I mean, we do see this in some respects in the major arcana. However, it is played super differently in the minor arcana, which I'll show you in just a moment. But with regards to like nuclear fallout, like I saw this judgment card and immediately thought, how is everyone calling this like a 50s deck? This is so much more than that. This is a Cold War deck. And even with, you know, the refugees in the bunker on the moon, like that is a very 60s image, with obviously the landing of the moon. And if anything, I think this card reminded me just a little bit of the Twilight Zone. There are a few Twilight Zone episodes that include people trying to get into like their bunkers because there was like several nukes that were going to go off and essentially just end the world. But at any rate, this theme of jingoism especially like really rears its ugly head in the sword suit. So I have a couple of the cards. We got the 5 of Swords, the 4 of Swords, the 8 of Swords, and the 9 of Swords. And with the exception of perhaps the 5 of Swords, I would definitely say that the 4, 8, and 9 of Swords are just purest depictions of PTSD. Because it wasn't until after World War II that, wish I remember what movie it was, but there was like one of the first depictions of just vets coming back from World War II and trying to acclimate into their normal lives and being very, like, it's basically just a very hard thing for them to do. And so this was around the time that, you know, we see vets, you know, having flashbacks and having other just mental anguishes that completely changed not so much who they were, but just the way that they behaved, because at that time our society didn't really take care of our vets all that well mentally, never mind physically. So this is a theme of objectification and the way that women were often seen as like these domestic housewives, or at least at the time that was the ideal, right? And I'm mildly certain that since it's so prevalent in the Suit of Cups, which I'll flip through in just a minute, I think I get a sense that's why so many people refer to this deck as a 50s deck, because there's a lot, I mean, there's a disembodied woman's head, right? And like it's showing so many of her different emotions. I wonder which ones she's actually able to use. Consider that fear is like super tiny, and sadness is like super big. That's sad. Anyways, so yes, we actually see so many depictions of like the ideal housewife and bride and widow and little lady friend, and just how she's thinking of everyone else besides herself and her rotting face. And interestingly enough, we do actually have depictions of consumption, which we will get to in just a moment. But I really like the way that this Nine of Cups is depicted, because like she's in her happy place, but she only has herself to kind of worry about, the way that, at least that's the sense that I kind of get from looking at this card. She has her bullets, she has her gun, she has her blanket, and she's just kind of chilling. And she only has, again, herself to worry about. And only when she has herself to worry about, then that's when she can actually branch out that worry and love and care to others, regardless of whether one has a family or not. But you know what I mean. But as promised, the next theme is consumption, and we see that here. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and say leisure and consumption, right? Because I mean, we have the woman here, like just kind of chilling despite what's going on outside. And then here we have a vending machine of what I assume to be is cigarettes, but I don't actually know. It just says vice, so I assume it's something bad for you, right? So at this point, I do want to show you a couple things in the hazard suit, which is this deck's pentacle suit. And so a lot of this does have some elements of consumption in a way that's really rather exploitative, to be honest, because as I look at these different cards, I mean, we have this man who completely hoarded pretty much everything into his bunker, and now he's shutting everyone out. We have a woman digging through the trash. We have a domesticated zombie. And we have not so ethical scientific testing. And those are all essentially elements of capitalism, really. Because usually in capitalism, there tends to be, you know, the haves and the have-nots, if you will. And what I find so disturbing about the hazard suit, is that here we have these zombie servants that are serving a normal family. So they ended up, I guess, enslaving a horde of undead people who may or may not be able to consent to really any of this, and I highly doubt that they're paid labor. We even have this kid who's chained to a mailbox, so that's kind of cool. And yeah, like I think I was kind of blown away when I was looking through the hazard suit a little bit more closely in preparation for this video, because I almost had like a Dragon's Tarot moment. It isn't as bad as the Dragon's Tarot, because the Dragon's Tarot does like actual harm to indigenous people, but for zombies, I mean, what does that necessarily, I mean, zombies can be metaphors for really anyone and anything. It just depends on like the context here. And I feel like the context here is like within tarot, whenever we want to do a reading for ourselves or for others, we're trying to find some sort of perspective to control a situation that we have very little control over, right? So I guess the hazard suit is still like a little weird for me, but I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a little something to be said about that. Finally, for the wand suit, there's not much in here, but I thought it was worth noting that something that definitely unquestionably makes this a Cold War deck is its theme of gentrification. And here we see the Tower card, and there's one particular room in the middle of the skyscraper where a bunch of zombies kind of break into this little house party and just kind of disturb everything and are about to like feast on these folks. And this is definitely highlighted even more so in the suit of wands. And here are a couple of the cards that I picked out that do that pretty vividly. The Cold War era is a culmination of a bunch of different things happening, of course, even in the context of the United States and what was happening there. So because the US was desperately trying to protect its capitalistic system and yet was also deindustrializing from post-World War II operations, essentially we have an influx of white Americans escaping cities and other deindustrialized towns in search for homogenous suburban areas. And so here, to me, we're seeing the age of white flight. And it's difficult to say if the zombies are the ones gentrifying the areas or if it's disturbing those suburban areas. That's kind of where I'm at here. Because zombies can mean so many different things. Like, sometimes they can mean, they can, like, signify white flight. Because let's say, for example, in Southern California, let's say LA specifically, you see an entire Latina community being evicted and wiped out to make room for not even Dodger Stadium, but the Dodger Stadium parking lot. So you see things like that to alter the space. And there is something to be said about this theme of monsters inhabiting built spaces that essentially alter them. You also see the complete rework of or the building of the LA freeways, and really just all of the freeways in Southern California, and those freeways having replaced more public transportation like streetcars that would originally allow everyone to be able to get to the places that they needed to get to, whether it be for work or leisure or anything like that. And then for the freeways to be built and to block off certain areas. So you essentially just have metaphorically speaking, these zombies coming in and keeping people trapped within their space, unable to get out, and changing the landscape for themselves in just a homogenous looking community. So that was kind of fun to explore when I was going through the wands. But yeah, so those are some of the themes that I noticed in like the zombie tarot. And so just to revisit that question, I mean, I kind of answered this earlier, but like, what exactly does it mean what are these zombies trying to teach us? Well, it really depends on perspective, but for the most part, they're trying to teach us how to maintain power and agency, and perhaps even in this case, like this deck in particular, I think it taught us a little bit of history. There's definitely a lot of history in this deck if you know how to find it. And just the sheer feelings of, like, say, jingoism or gentrification or consumption, like those are all very American qualities. And so this is an incredibly like just American themed type of deck. And I think that is just so fascinating. Much like the zombie tarot, fair warning, this deck is not in order, but I did want to mention that the Tarot Z, when I was looking through each of the cards and reading each of the little short stories, I kind of dawned on me that, yeah, this deck is actually quite similar to the Tarot Restless in some ways, because a lot of the cards don't necessarily, like, there isn't really much of an action per se, not all the time at least, Like, it's just this piece of artwork that we're looking at, and we don't always really know what's happening, especially when it comes to, like, let's say Six of Pentacles, for example. Like, Six of Pentacles is generally a card of charity, being able to give, after the Five, which is, kind of like, for lack of a better term, poverty, or just kind of trying to hold on to your material. But what does this mean? It's kind of hard to tell. There are a bunch of pictures on the walls. He looks kind of melancholic, and he looks back at the reader. You see a leg down here, so probably someone who was killed, maybe someone that he killed. I don't know. But I think this deck is a little different than the Tarot Restless, in that this deck is prompting us to really feel empathy. And again, just like in the Tarot Restless, I had read a small article in the Monsters in the Classrooms. It's called Creating Visual Rhetoric by Dr. Hightower. And basically the monster is in action, or a moment. It's quite mundane, but since the grotesque is often unnameable, we can only experience it for what it is. And that's kind of what's happening here too. Because in order to understand the context of each and every image, you kind of need the guidebook, to be honest. You can make guesses. I think the court cards are done really well, because they do so well in just depicting, like, just these sceneries and this, and the qualities of what it means to be a Queen of Cups or a King of Swords or anything like that. But I would also say that this deck is doing a little bit more too. So in a different article within the same text, it's called Embracing the Abnormal by Dr. Mittman. He offers us a teleological argument to the existence of monsters. And so I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he says, if everything was designed for a purpose, monsters being the deviation indicates a warning. And on face value, yes, you would probably say that too, because when we look at these different zombies, yeah, we're essentially seeing the undead that shouldn't be there. But Mittman offers a counterpoint from that, because monsters kind of allows for the exploration of biases and prejudices. And so, yeah, at face value, this card is absolutely horrifying, right? Literally, the zombie looks like he found us and he's about ready to just munch on our bones. But let's go ahead and read the description for this card. The undead control the cities. Rumble spills everywhere. Food is scarce for both the remaining humans and the infected. A lone zombie roams the dark parks in search of something to snack on. It stumbles over a cloaked figure, reaching out with a dirty hand and balancing itself on a sharp piece of metal. A wail emits from its mouth. Its body is emaciated. The disease and lack of nutrition wasted the body down to its tightest form. Its head rises and darts around. It steadies its form and pushes on, searching for another victim. So essentially, my sense is it kind of ignored us. And it's also as hungry as we probably are. So essentially, like, there is a little bit of normalizing, like, that kind of difference, because this is a new world now. I think I might have passed it, but there was even, I think it was the Hierophant card. Yes, a Hierophant card, who essentially, like, created a brand new religion, which was weird. But yeah, this is like a brand new world that they've kind of made. And in having all of these small vignettes for each card, the way that it's written prompts us to normalize that difference and sort of broaden our empathy, not only for the people who are living in this world, but for the undead as well. because there are some pretty heartbreaking looking cards, even though we don't necessarily know the context. Like this one's kind of sad, but I mean the guidebook in such short like sentences does so much to really give us an opportunity to stop and think a little bit about this world. And if I'm being honest, that's really all I got for the Tarot Z, because it's a little it's not unfascinating. Like I do find it very interesting to be able to go through these cards and have a nice little ride with the guidebook, because it is honestly like reading short stories. It's not as like rich in like a historical context. I think this has more like pop culture references, and unfortunately I'm not familiar with all of them because weirdly enough, like zombie movies kind of scare me and I can't do gore anymore. So this deck does a really good job of helping us like expand our empathy even when we don't really think it's needed in the context of a post-apocalyptic nightmare. So what did we learn today? I believe that we learned that zombies are just a pedagogy in and of themselves. And just in case you don't know, pedagogy means teaching philosophy. So zombies are just so dynamic in being able to either be a metaphor for various like historical eras and all of the nitty-gritty within those eras. And they're also a great metaphor and placeholder for the affective domain. And so the affective domain is essentially this concept of not only what we're learning, but why it's important that we're learning what we're learning. And even like some more of the squishy stuff, like in this case, being able to show and depict empathy and putting in that effort to get to know the importance of the subjects that we're analyzing here. So why don't you share with me, like what does it mean to pick up a zombie deck for you? Just to set the mood for Halloween? That's totally valid. Are these decks funny to you? Do you use either of them as shadow decks? What is your experience with working with zombies in tarot? Because apparently for me, I learned a lot, not only within my own career, but also in my own interests of, U.S. history. So yeah, pray tell. Let us know in the comments. If you want to take a crack at the bridge riddle, you're more than welcome to do so. I linked the video that I got it from in the description below. Until next time, folks. Thanks for stopping by the study space. I really appreciate you, and I'll hopefully catch you sooner than later. Bye.